Hey there, this is your host, Dali Rivera. I am the founder of the DaliTalks podcast. And today I want to talk to you about Juneteenth. I wanted to talk about this because it's something that a lot of people still don't know much about. And so I just want to make sure that you are aware about what it is exactly, and so that you can share the knowledge. That's something that I'm always advocating for, right? Just share the knowledge that you have. So Juneteenth is America's or the United States' newest federal holiday. It is observed each year, the 19th of June, to mark the official day of that slavery ended in the United States. So the day has long been celebrated by Black Americans as a symbol of their emancipation, but not all Black people, because there's still a huge demographic of people or amount of people that just had no idea what this was about. But the story behind the holiday and how Juneteenth got its meaning starts more than 150 years ago in Galveston, Texas. So we all know that President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1, 1863. Well, maybe not everybody knows the exact date, but we all know that that happened, right? And that was as the nation entered the Civil War's third year. The proclamation declared that 3 million slaves living in the Confederate States were free. And for those who were largely isolated from Union armies, life continued as if emancipation just never happened. So they were just not told that they were free. And this was the case in places like Texas, where thousands of slaves were unaware that they had been freed already. You know, their slave owners decided to withhold this information because they would lose millions, because, you know, they were their workers, the free labor. So on June 19th, 1865, over 2 years after Lincoln declared enslaved persons free, Major General Gordon Granger and the Union Army troops marched to Galveston, Texas to enforce Emancipation Proclamation. And they freed over 250,000 Black Americans, the last enslaved peoples in Texas. So, I mean, this is a big deal that should have been celebrated, you know, years and years ago. But a lot of people just didn't know. So let me read to you the general order that the general read when he arrived with his troops to Galveston. It's General Order No. 3. And it read something like this. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection that heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. So the words that they chose are really interesting to me because, you know, they're advised to remain quietly, meaning no uproar, don't make a big fuss about it. And then they told them to stay where they're at and work for wages, because I'm assuming they knew they weren't going to have any options, although the law now said that they were going to be free. The racism still existed, regardless of message, you know. Many former slaves immediately just got out of Texas. They went to neighboring states. A lot of people decided to not remain quiet, and large celebrations began. They continued regularly into the early 20th century, each, you know, June 19th. So they call it Juneteenth. It spread from Texas to neighboring states such as Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and later it spread out to Alabama, Florida, and California as more and more African-American Texans migrated. But that's not where it ended. I want you to know about Opal Lee. She was known as the grandmother of Juneteenth, and she played a large part in making Juneteenth a federal holiday. On June 19th, 1939, at the age of 12, Lee and her family were displaced by 500 rioters in the town of Marshall, Texas. Her home was then burned and destroyed. And as she grew up, she became a teacher and an activist, and she helped establish the Tarrant Country Black Historical and Genealogical Society, Citizens Concerned with Human Dignity organization. I know that's very long-winded. She also she established the Fort Worth Juneteenth Museum, which I wish I would have known when I lived in Texas and I was so close to Fort Worth, but I'm gonna have to go back to Texas and visit. So Lee campaigned for decades to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. She promoted the idea by leading 2.5-mile walks each year, representing 2.5 years that it took for news to reach every single person that was enslaved. And at the age of 89, she conducted a symbolic walk. Look, at 89, she walked from Fort Worth, Texas, and she left September 2016 and walked to Washington, D.C., arriving January 2017. That is some kind of dedication, because when it's below 75 degrees here in Maryland, I am not coming out. I do not like the cold. She's a baddie. She was a baddie. On June 2021, at the age of 94, Lee's efforts succeeded as a bill to make Juneteenth a federal holiday was passed by Congress, and it was signed into law by President Joe Biden. So she was honored as a guest at the signing ceremony, which I'm sure for her was like just incredibly special. So Juneteenth is a holiday where we recommit ourselves to the work of equity, equality, justice. We honor the centuries of struggle, and we honor the progress that was led by so many abolitionists, educators, civil rights advocates, lawyers, activists, trade unionists, religious leaders. I mean, everybody in the nation who has been advocating for equality, justice, and equity. All of this to say, please share the knowledge, celebrate. But when you celebrate, also don't forget to donate to your favorite charity that helps, Black people. Please educate yourself more about the disparities that still exist in this country and everywhere in the world, just for being a person of color, or for being a Black person. And please think about all the stereotypes that you hear and that, you might even believe, because, stereotypes come up as jokes or just like little fables to try to get people's attention, but then you start believing them. And if you do not talk about the reality, about the facts, then you end up believing those stereotypes, and unconsciously, then we start treating people a certain way, sometimes in a bad way. Sometimes we start profiling people or just discriminating them. And this ties a lot into bullying and just violence and many other topics. So I hope that you understood clearly what I just shared. Hopefully I didn't confuse you. I hope that you share this video with others, have conversations with your kids and your loved ones, your friends, maybe even your colleagues, and go out there and celebrate, and also do something good for the cause. Thank you so much for listening, and come back next week for a new topic.
Hey, did you like that episode? If you did, be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you may be listening and write a review. If you want more tips or some behind-the-scenes videos, make sure to follow my mom at DaliTalks on Instagram. You can turn on notifications for her posts and stories as well. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. See you next time.